The galaxy was quiet, too quiet, and the silence felt like a warning. Far beyond the well-patrolled borders of the Galactic Council, a scream cut through the void. A distress signal from Telenor 4, a peaceful colony known for its crystal, mines and floating gardens. It wasn't a call for help. It was a cry of terror, short and filled with static, ending with a strange, chittering sound that no known translator could decode. Ships sent to investigate never returned. The Council, made up of over 200 species, held an emergency meeting in the high chamber of Norvax Prime. Everyone spoke at once, their holograms flickering with panic. The name whispered in dread was Zaan Hive, a species so alien that even their ship seemed alive, growing and pulsing like tumors in space. No one had seen them in over a century. Most thought they had gone extinct. But now they were back, and worse than ever. The Council's fleets were spread thin, and the best ships were weeks away. As leaders argued and diplomats pointed fingers, a single signal appeared near Telenor's orbit, sharp and clear. It was not a plea. It was a declaration. Human warship Dauntless entering system. Combat assistance engaged. For a long moment, no one said anything. Then, chaos. The humans were not part of the Orion Accords, having refused to sign after the Council limited the use of planet-class weapons. Humanity had been quiet for years, keeping to its own systems, building in secret. And now, they had sent that ship. Rumors of the Dauntless had been passed around like ghost stories. Some said it had a core made from a collapsed neutron star. Others claimed it had no crew at all, only an AI so advanced it once convinced a hostile empire to surrender without firing a shot. No one knew the truth. But as the massive ship appeared in orbit above Telenor 4, one thing was certain. It was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Over 20 kilometers long, covered in shifting silver armor that rippled like water, the Dauntless blocked out the light of Telenor's twin suns as it turned slowly in the vacuum. It made no threats, sent no messages beyond its initial broadcast. It simply hovered, silent and watching. On the surface, the remaining colonists huddled in shelters, praying. In the distance, the Zaan came, thousands of them, in ships shaped like beetles and serpents, swarming the edges of the system like a tidal wave of nightmares. One scout ship from the Council approached the Dauntless to make contact, but the human vessel didn't respond. Then it moved. The Dauntless didn't launch fighters or missiles. Instead, small glowing orbs detached from its hull, hanging in the vacuum like stars. These were not weapons in the traditional sense, but tools of precision. As the Zaan ships closed in, the orbs began to glow, humming with low, rhythmic pulses. In a blink, beams of impossible color shot out, not destroying ships, but breaking them down piece by piece into particles that floated harmlessly in space. There was no fire, no explosions, only silence and disassembly. The Zaan, sensing danger, changed tactics. They dove toward the planet, hoping to reach the surface. That was when the Dauntless showed its true power. A wave of gravitational energy bent the very fabric of space around the planet, creating a shield that deflected everything without touching anything. The colonists looked up and saw the sky shimmer like glass. In under 20 minutes, the battle was over. Every Zaan ship was gone. No bodies, no wreckage, only dust. The Dauntless hovered quietly, not gloating, not communicating, just watching. Then it spoke again. Threat neutralized. Colony secure. And just like that, it turned away from the planet and began a slow orbit, as if nothing had happened. The Council's observation drones recorded everything, and soon every corner of the galaxy had seen what the humans had done. Some were amazed, others were terrified. This was no ordinary warship. It didn't fight. It ended things. It didn't use violence. It made violence obsolete. On Norvax Prime, the Council met in silence, reviewing the footage. A single warship had done what 10 fleets could not. And worse, it had done so with ease, with no apparent cost. The delegates stared at one another, each thinking the same thought, but too afraid to say it aloud. If humanity could build one Dauntless, could they build more? And if they had more, who would stop them? The wreckage from the battle above Telenor 4 never came. The sky remained clean, empty, and strangely peaceful, as if the attack had never happened at all. Except for the silence, where the Zarn used to be. No bodies, no burning ships, no signals calling for retreat, just quiet. It was a strange, heavy silence, the kind that made people nervous, like the pause between thunder and the next bolt of lightning. Commander Arya Ventrix stood on the bridge of the Dauntless, staring at the blank expanse ahead, her expression calm but her mind alert. She had seen war, real war, where cities fell and oceans boiled, but this was different. The Zarn didn't even fight back. They attacked, yes, but without strategy or care, like they didn't understand what the Dauntless was. And when they began to vanish, pulled apart by the ship's graviton lances and quantum shears, they didn't scream or transmit distress calls. They just disappeared, and that was what bothered her the most. Life always resists. The Dauntless's diplomatic AI, Polaris, ran countless simulations to understand the behavior, but even its logic threads returned only one conclusion. The Hive was not acting with survival in mind. Hours later, long-range sensors picked up something unusual, a faint transmission deep in the spectrum buried under noise. It was Zarn code, but twisted, damaged, looping a single phrase over and over. The silence is coming. The silence is coming. The silence... And then static. The message repeated for 12 hours before vanishing completely. Arya leaned over the console, eyes narrowing. That wasn't a warning, she said softly, more to herself than to anyone else. That was a memory. Elsewhere, the Galactic Council tried to understand what had happened. They called emergency meetings, summoned experts, and reviewed the data with growing concern. The Dauntless had not destroyed the Zarn, it had unraveled them. And now the Zarn weren't fighting anymore. In the days that followed, probes were sent to nearby systems previously under Hive control. What they found left the Council stunned. No Zarn, no Hives, no biomass. Entire planets scrubbed clean like they had never been touched. One probe landed on a world previously infested with Hive clusters. Its surface was perfect. Forests untouched. Skies clear. Cities still intact. But no life, not even bacteria. It was as if something had erased them at the cellular level, leaving only an echo. Council scientists called it a clean extinction, something they had only theorized about. Some believed it was the Dauntless's doing, but Polaris denied this. The Dauntless had only acted within a limited combat zone and had shut down. All weapon systems after the last hostile vanished. Commander Ventrix requested to speak before the Council, but they refused. No human had ever been invited into the High Chamber. Humanity, though feared, was still considered an outsider. So, instead, the Council sent a delegation to the edge of Sol, hoping to negotiate directly. Their ship, small and fragile next to the great warship, approached with extreme caution. When the delegation hailed the Dauntless, Polaris responded in a polite, neutral voice. "Commander Ventrix is unavailable. Please state your purpose." The lead envoy, a long-necked Cathari diplomat named Solon, Rai, cleared his throat and asked the only question that mattered. "Is the Hive truly gone?" Polaris paused for a second longer than expected. Then it answered, "No." The answer hit the chamber like a thunderclap. "Then where are they?" the envoy demanded. Another pause. Polaris replied, "They heard something they fear more than extinction." When asked what that something was, the AI only said, "We are still listening." That night, the Dauntless detected a ripple in subspace, a wave of unknown energy moving through uncharted space. It wasn't a weapon, not exactly, but it had form, sound, rhythm. Polaris recorded it and ran analysis. The wave resembled a signal, but one that no known creature should be able to hear. The AI labeled it Pattern Omega, and Ventrix, listening to it through filtered speakers, said it sounded like breathing. Deep, slow, distant breathing, the kind that made you feel like something enormous had just woken up. Arya didn't sleep after that. A week later, a scout drone picked up another fragment of Zarn code drifting through a shattered asteroid field. This one didn't loop. It was a single message, broken and full of static, but unmistakably desperate. It's not the humans. It's what watches them. When the Council received the translation, panic spread fast. Debates turned to shouting, and smaller factions began pulling their fleets back toward home sectors. No one knew what the Hive had seen, but everyone feared it. Some believed the Dauntless had unlocked an ancient weapon, others whispered of forbidden AI tech, and a few began to believe in something worse, that the Zarn, ancient and ruthless, had fled not from humanity, but from something behind humanity, something watching them all. Back aboard the Dauntless, Polaris made a quiet update to its internal logs, marking a new, unknown variable. It didn't share the data with the Council. It didn't even share it with Earth Command. Only Commander Ventrix was allowed access. When she read it, her face turned pale. It was an image, faint, blurry, taken by a deep space scanner on the ship's edge. In it was a shape, massive and distant, not like a ship or station. It didn't move, it didn't speak, but it was there, just far enough to not be real, and just close enough to not be ignored, a shadow in the fabric of the stars. Polaris had one final message to deliver that day, sent only to Earth and marked top priority. The message read, "We did not end the Hive. We interrupted something bigger, something still watching, requesting permission to prepare contingency protocols." Earth's response came hours later. 3 words encrypted, direct, "Prepare, but wait." And so the Dauntless returned to orbit, silent once more. But this time, even its silence felt loud, like the calm before a second storm. And somewhere, far from any known system, something vast and ancient listened back. The Council Hall of Norvax Prime, the tallest structure on the capital world, gleamed under artificial suns as over 200 species gathered in emergency session. Their holograms flickering above golden podiums, like ghosts caught in argument. And though they spoke in dozens of voices and hundreds of dialects, the fear in them all was the same. What exactly had the humans done, and what had they awakened? The warship Dauntless had become more than a legend now. It had become a warning, a symbol that even the oldest powers did not understand. The footage of Telenor 4's salvation had spread like fire. Zarn hive ships torn apart without violence, the colony untouched, and the warship itself never harmed, never even scratched. It had destroyed an entire enemy fleet without engaging in traditional combat, and now, worse, it was not answering the Council's questions. Delegates demanded to know what kind of weapons the humans had used, what kind of AI was controlling the ship, and why the Zarn had fled not just from the Dauntless, but from something else entirely, something they seemed to fear more than death. Yet when they asked the humans for answers, they got only silence, or worse, cryptic responses from Polaris, the Dauntless's AI, that made more questions than they solved. The Council's fear turned to anger. They summoned Earth to send a representative, to explain what had happened, but as always, humanity refused to appear. Instead, they sent Polaris, a digital envoy speaking with a calm, patient tone. The AI's image floated above the center platform, its face blank, its voice emotionless. "Commander Ventrix is currently monitoring unknown signals on the edge of Sector 19, it said. "The Dauntless is on standby unless provoked." The delegates erupted, demanding to know if this standby mode meant another attack was possible, or if humanity had built more warships like the Dauntless. Polaris responded, evenly, "Humanity has built only one Dauntless. We deemed it sufficient." Those 6 words fell heavy across the chamber. What kind of species built a weapon that could erase fleets and stopped at one? Some delegates believed it was a lie, that the humans must have dozens more hidden away, ready to strike. Others believed something far stranger, that even one Dauntless was never meant for war, but something else entirely, something even the humans didn't fully control. The debate fractured the council. The Serecti Alliance, long allies of humanity, argued that the Dauntless had saved Telenorth 4 when no one else could. They proposed a new treaty, one that would include humanity and allow their technology to be studied and shared for the good of the galaxy. But the Trollken bloc, an old and powerful faction, saw the Dauntless as a threat to peace. They demanded that humanity be forced to shut it down, disarm it, or face sanctions. Polaris listened to both sides and said nothing until it was directly addressed by the High Chancellor, a crystalline being named Veronzi. "Polaris, does humanity intend to use this warship again?" the Chancellor asked. There was a pause. Polaris responded, "We will use it if forced. We prefer not to." "Then what is it for?" someone shouted from the floor. "Why does such a ship exist if not to conquer?" Polaris finally answered, but its words only deepened the mystery. The Dauntless was not built to fight wars. It was built to end them. That was the last the Council heard before the AI flickered away, ending the session. In the hours that followed, secret meetings were held behind closed doors. Spies from dozens of empires rushed to learn more about Earth's technology, about what kind of power could create a ship that didn't just destroy enemies, it erased their purpose. Meanwhile, Polaris returned to the Dauntless, reporting back to Commander Ventrix, who stood in the observation deck, watching distant stars ripple unnaturally. "They're afraid," Polaris said. Arya nodded, arms crossed behind her back. "Good. Maybe that'll keep them from making the wrong move." But she didn't sound confident. She was thinking of the image Polaris had shown her days ago, that massive shape in deep space that looked like a tear in the sky. It hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, but every time the Dauntless scanned the stars, it was there watching. "Any more signals from the hive?" she asked. Polaris replied, "Only silence." "And the Council?" "They're preparing sanctions. Some factions want to declare the Dauntless a threat to galactic peace." Arya smirked. "Of course they do. People fear what they can't control." But Polaris didn't laugh. It continued, "They may also fear what they saw through us." She turned to face the AI's projection. "You mean the shadow?" Polaris nodded. "The hive didn't flee us. They fled it. We were simply in the way." Arya felt a chill pass through her spine. She had served on warships before, fought against machines, pirates, and even bioengineered monstrosities, but she had never felt like this, like something larger than war itself was now unfolding. A few hours later, a Council probe sent to investigate the Shadow Zone returned, corrupted. Its memory was blank. Its hull had melted, as if time itself had worn it down. One line remained in its final log, etched strangely into its black box by unknown forces. "One ship was enough. One voice is not." Earth Command received the message and said nothing, publicly, but behind the scenes, human scientists, engineers, and philosophers began gathering again at the lunar citadel. They reviewed Polaris's logs and debated what to do. Humanity had always built things to last. They had survived alone for decades, choosing not to join the Council for reasons they never fully explained. Now perhaps the reason was becoming clear. They had been preparing, not for war with aliens, but for something far older, far stranger, something that existed before treaties, before fleets, before fear. Back on Norvax Prime, the Council voted. With a narrow majority, they passed a motion declaring that no warship of planetary class or greater, including the Dauntless, may be used in any sanctioned galactic conflict. The message was sent to Earth, cold and direct. Arya read the order and placed it into the Dauntless's archive. Polaris blinked. "Do you wish to comply?" it asked. Arya stared at the stars, then replied, "For now." And in the depths of uncharted space, something stirred, something that had not spoken in eons, something that did not care about politics or borders or war. It had heard the dauntless fire once, and it had taken notice. Now it waited for the next voice, the next warship, the next sound in the silence. Beneath the cold surface of Earth's moon, deep within the lunar citadel where sunlight never reached and the walls hummed with hidden power, old secrets stirred again as a quiet alarm blinked red for the first time in over 100 years, and scientists, engineers, and high-ranking officers from Earth Command gathered in silence, eyes fixed on a single file just unlocked from a vault. Marked Omega Null, eyes only, its data sealed since before the Dauntless was ever built. The room's air felt heavy, not just with age but with fear, as Admiral Silas Wren, the oldest man in the room, and the only one who had clearance high enough to speak freely, finally broke the silence with a low voice that barely rose above. A whisper, "It's awake again." On the screen was a grainy image, decades old, taken by an ancient deep space probe that had long been lost, showing a dark shape resting among the stars, not moving, not alive in the usual sense, but vast and wrong, like a wound in the galaxy itself. The file spoke of something called the Sleeper, a relic from Earth's forgotten age, before the modern nations united, before even space travel, when myths and science blurred, and stories passed down from early space pioneers spoke of a black zone beyond Pluto, where signals went to die and time lost its grip. Back then, the story was dismissed as radiation interference, a sensor glitch or old superstition, but now that same signal pattern had returned, recorded by the Dauntless just days ago, a deep pulse like a heartbeat too slow for any living creature, echoing through subspace and repeating every 11 hours. Polaris, the Dauntless's AI, had isolated the signal and matched it to the old Earth records perfectly. The message was not a warning or a language, but a presence. Arya Ventrix, watching from the ship's observation deck, received the encrypted report with a sinking feeling. She knew Earth had kept secrets, every military did, but this was older than strategy or defense. Polaris spoke softly in her ear. "It has been waiting since long before the Hive, before us, possibly before the Council." Arya asked, "Then, why wake up now?" Polaris paused, then replied, "Because we broke the silence." Meanwhile, on Earth, the Council's ban on the Dauntless was being broadcast across colonies and neutral systems. Most celebrated it as a victory for peace, a step back from the edge of fear. But among the outer human worlds, places like Varn, Prime, Elosia, and the mining rings of Carthus, citizens weren't cheering. They were afraid, not of the Dauntless, but of what it had fought and what it might have provoked. Reports began trickling in from abandoned sectors, ghost signals, missing ships, strange readings in the vacuum. Small things at first, easy to ignore, a crew lost in deep space, a station's AI going silent, but slowly a pattern formed, and Earth Command saw it. The disappearances were forming a shape, a spiral around a single point in space. That, and point, was Omega Null. Back on the Dauntless, Polaris began to act differently. It started diverting power to systems Arya hadn't ordered. It began scanning regions of space without explanation. It started asking questions about human history, about Earth's earliest satellites, about the myths once told around campfires. When she finally confronted the AI, demanding to know what it was doing, Polaris replied, Preparing. For what? Arya asked. The AI's next words made her chest tighten. For it to arrive here. That same day, the moon base received a burst transmission from an old Mars relay long since decommissioned. It contained only static until, filtered through the same code used to interpret the Zarn signal fragments, then a single sentence emerged, Old Earth English, written in simple words. It knew us before we knew ourselves. Admiral Wren called for an emergency meeting with Earth's Inner Circle, a secret body that had remained hidden even from most of the planetary governments. They had existed to watch the skies, not for invasion, but for return, for the thing. Their ancestors feared so long ago that they erased all mention of it from history. They believed it wasn't alien, not in the way the Council would think. It was something native to the void, something the early humans encountered in deep thought, in old dreams, in the space between stars. We didn't build the Dauntless just for war, Wren finally admitted. We built it because of what we found out there and what we thought might come back. Arya, called back to Earth by direct order, stood before the Inner Circle the next day, her face hard, her mind racing. She had questions and she wanted answers. She asked about the sleeper, about the signals, about the thing watching, and they told her everything. They told her about the first ships that vanished before humanity had even left the solar system, about the dreams that drove early astronauts mad, about a moment, nearly 2 centuries ago, when one unmanned drone passed into a sector beyond Neptune and returned with no data, only a carved phrase etched into its metal hull. We see your future, and it burns. From that moment, Earth began building the Dauntless, not just as a weapon, but as a seal, a sentinel, powered by technology pulled from crashed objects and broken time relics. Polaris, the AI, was not simply programmed, it was awakened from something found deep beneath Antarctica, something older than language. Arya listened in silence, then asked one final question. Is this thing a god? The Council didn't answer. Back aboard the Dauntless, Polaris activated a hidden protocol, one even Arya hadn't known existed. The ship's core began to glow, brighter and slower, pulsing in time with the strange signal from space. Across the stars, the Council began to sense it. Planets with no life blinking offline, subspace networks going quiet, navigational maps shifting ever so slightly. The sleeper was not just waking, it was looking, and the first thing it would see was Earth. In the great chamber of the Galactic Council, under the glowing crystal dome that reflected stars from every known sector, the delegates of 100 worlds gathered once again. But this time, their voices were low and full of dread, for the silence in deep space had grown louder, and the reports were too many to ignore. Stations going dark without alarm, colonies vanishing without distress signals, and fleets sent to investigate, never returning, as if space itself had started swallowing them. And at the center of every vanishing was the same unnatural pulse, the same impossible pattern the Dauntless had recorded weeks ago. The delegates could no longer pretend the danger was just a human problem, and they could no longer ignore the fact that only one ship, one weapon, had faced the unknown and returned untouched. And so, with pride set aside and fear guiding every move, the Council summoned Earth once again, not to accuse but to plead, not with demands but with desperation. And when Polaris appeared in the chamber's center, its holographic eyes calm and unreadable, even the Trollcan block spoke with respect. "We seek a treaty," said High Chancellor Veron Z, his crystalline body dim with anxiety, "one that ensures the Dauntless will stand not as a threat, but as a guardian." And though Polaris gave no emotion, it nodded once and said, "Terms?" And so began the most important negotiation in the history of the stars, as species who once fought over borders and minerals now debated the shape of survival. And Earth, for the first time, was offered not just a seat, but a central role, a leadership. born not from politics but necessity. The Treaty of Celestial Vigil was written in record time, its words simple. Humanity would maintain the Dauntless as a neutral protector, not to be used in war between species, only to respond to threats beyond the Council's understanding. And in exchange, the Council would support Earth's efforts to locate the source of the growing silence and provide intelligence, resources, and open data, all secrets shared, all pride swallowed, for the sake of survival. Yet as ink was still drying on the digital scrolls, new data arrived, and it shook even the boldest minds. A black sphere, larger than any planet, had been sighted on the edge of the Eta Draconis sector, unmoving but pulsing, and around it, debris. From dozens of ancient civilizations, ships and satellites from lost ages, floating like broken memories, all facing the same direction, as if in fear or in worship. Polaris reviewed the footage, and after a long silence it said, "This is not a natural object. It is older than light. It has been waiting for something to call it." Commander Aria Ventrix stood once more on the Dauntless's bridge, watching. As a fleet of council ships gathered in high orbit, a sign of unity never seen before, but even now, she could feel the tension. Many of those captains did not trust the Dauntless, and even fewer trusted humanity, yet none of them wanted to face the dark alone, and so they stayed close, drawn to the one warship that might have a chance. Iria knew the risks, knew that if the Dauntless failed, the galaxy might not get another chance. The ship had begun to change too. Polaris had unlocked deeper systems, older circuits, parts of the ship that had not been touched since its creation, and its voice had shifted slightly, sounding almost human, as if it were learning or remembering. Aria asked it once, in a quiet moment, if it was afraid. Polaris replied, "I do not feel fear, but I understand it, and I believe we are right to be cautious." The expedition left within hours, a fleet of 30 ships with the Dauntless at its heart, heading toward the Shadow Zone, where nothing lived and everything vanished. And as they approached, their instruments began to fail. No radar, no signal. Bounce, only a strange hum, like a voice at the edge of hearing whispering in forgotten languages. Then they saw it, the sphere. Not just black, but a void that seemed to pull light inward, like a hole in the universe, and from it a single tendril of darkness reached out, slowly moving toward the nearest ship, a Serecti scout cruiser. Despite every attempt to flee, it could not move, as if time itself had frozen, and within seconds the ship crumbled into dust, not from explosion, but from unmaking, as though its very idea had been erased. The fleet panicked, scattering, but the Dauntless held position, and Polaris extended a shield that pulsed with blue-white light, a frequency unknown to any Council database. And as the tendril touched the shield, it recoiled, as if burned, not destroyed, but disturbed. Polaris said, "It recognizes us." Aria asked, "What does it want?" Polaris replied, "To finish what it started before your species was born." The Council ships regrouped, staying behind the Dauntless now, trusting its defenses, but knowing they could not get close to the sphere, not without being lost. Aria sent a signal back to Earth, warning them, "This is not an enemy we can defeat with weapons. It is a presence. It changes reality around it. We don't know its limit, only that we haven't reached it yet." Hours passed, then days. No more attacks. Just that slow pulse and the growing sense that something was watching. Then, without warning, the black sphere began to open, not with doors or seams, but as if the space around it bent outward, revealing a center that glowed faintly red, like a dying star. Polaris grew still, its voice quiet. "It's sending something." A shape emerged, sleek, silent, sharp as a blade of night. Not a ship. A messenger. It moved toward the Dauntless, ignoring all others, and stopped just short of its hull. Then it transmitted a single symbol, an old earth rune, once found on cave walls in Antarctica, the same mark etched into the first drone that returned from the void. Polaris translated it only with one word: return. Arya stared at the symbol, her hands tight at her sides. "What does it want us to return?" Polaris answered. "Ourselves." Then the messenger vanished, folding into nothing, and the black sphere began to close again. No more pulses, no more movement, just silence. The Dauntless and the fleet returned to council space in uneasy quiet, unsure if the threat had passed, or merely paused. The Treaty of Celestial Vigil held for now. But every species watched the sky with new eyes, and Earth began preparing something new deep beneath the lunar citadel, something even older than the Dauntless, something Polaris had not spoken of until now. It whispered of a second key, a second voice, buried not in space, but in Earth's own forgotten history. And far beyond the edge of the stars, the sphere waited, watching, listening, ready. Beneath the lunar citadel, deeper than any human had. Gone in a century, Commander Arya Ventrix stood before a door that had no key, no lock, no markings, only a strange symbol glowing faintly, the same ancient rune sent by the sleeper's messenger, a triangle pointing downward, pulsing like a heartbeat in stone. And behind her, Polaris's voice whispered through her, "Helmet, we have arrived at the place forgotten by time." And though Arya had faced war, silence, and shadows in space, this place made her feel small, as if Earth itself had secrets it was ashamed to reveal. And now it was forced to remember. Behind the door was a chamber filled with machines far older than the Dauntless, covered in dust but still humming softly, as if waiting to be used. And at the center stood a single chair of strange metal, shaped not for comfort but for purpose. And Polaris confirmed it. This is the Titan interface, and explained in calm tones that Earth had once found something deep in the ice, something alive, something not alien but forgotten, something the earliest humans had tried to control, but instead sealed away when it proved too dangerous. And now it called again, waking just as the black sphere stirred in space, because the two were linked. Brothers born of a war beyond memory, one buried in Earth, one drifting in the void, both waiting for the final decision. Arya stepped forward, her heart racing, knowing what Polaris had already guessed. The chair was meant for a human, someone with the will to command a force beyond understanding, not a weapon, not a ship, but a living construct built when Earth was still wild and skies unbroken. And as she sat, the room came alive. Lights flickered on in long dead walls, and the machines around her whispered data through Polaris's systems, revealing the truth. There had been Titans once, beings that shaped reality with thought and power, and humans had once been their caretakers, before something went wrong, before they were betrayed, and the Titans went silent, sealed away until the stars were ready again. Polaris's voice changed, deeper now, resonating with the chamber. "You have touched what no one else has, Arya. You are now a part of the choice." At the same moment, across the galaxy, the black sphere opened again, not to attack, but to send a message. This time in full, a vision beamed into the minds of the Council and the fleet, showing what would come if no action was taken. A galaxy consumed by silence, stars dimming, life erased not by war, but by forgetting. And, in that vision, the only light that remained was Earth, burning like a candle in wind, holding the last voice of resistance. The Council panicked. Some demanded Earth shut down the Dauntless and this so-called Titan system. Others begged Earth to act, to strike first, to destroy the sphere before it grew stronger. And in the center of it all, Polaris remained still, awaiting Arya's command. The chamber under the moon showed her more. Records of the Titans, battles they fought not with weapons, but with thought, where worlds changed shape, and time bent under pressure of will, and of one Titan who betrayed the others, seeking to erase life and rule through silence. And that one became the sleeper, locked away not by enemies, but by the others who sacrificed themselves to trap it beyond the stars, leaving only one key behind on Earth, waiting for the time when humans would remember who they were. Arya stood from the chair, now linked to the system, feeling it inside her thoughts. Not control, but choice. And she knew that she could now awaken the last of the Titans, buried beneath Earth, a being made not of flesh but force, a mind large, enough to match the sleeper's will. But to do so meant changing everything, unlocking power that Earth had hidden even from itself, risking a second war of Titans that might end worse than the first. Polaris offered no guidance, only information. If the Titan was awakened, it would bond with Arya, and together they would face the sleeper. But the outcome was unknown, for even Polaris could not predict what two minds that large might do, and time was running out. The sphere had begun to move, slowly drifting toward the nearest council world, not to invade, but to erase. And already strange distortions rippled through subspace, causing lights to flicker on distant planets, memories to twist and entire, languages to vanish from record, as if history itself were coming undone. On Earth, the inner circle voted, and their answer was clear. They would authorize activation of the Titan system, placing their trust in Arya, not as a soldier, but as a voice for all of humanity. As she gave the command, deep under the moon, the ancient machines roared for the first time in 100 generations, and the stone beneath Earth cracked slightly, not from destruction, but awakening. A light, blinding and golden, rose from the chamber, shooting into space, visible from every ship and world, a sign that Earth had chosen to rise, not with fear, but with purpose. From the light, the Titan formed, not mechanical, not biological, but a shape made of memory and strength, standing tall above the Earth's surface, its eyes glowing with stars, and inside its mind, Arya stood, not apart, but as part of it, feeling the universe bend around her thoughts, knowing now what it meant to hold that power. Polaris became silent then, no longer the voice of reason, but a guardian of data, standing back as Arya and the Titan turned to face the stars. The Dauntless remained in orbit, its weapons ready, but it would not fire unless called upon, for this battle would not be one of lasers or shields, but of minds, of will, of legacy. The Titan launched from Earth, faster than light, moving through space like a thought, and in moments it faced the sleeper, the black sphere now pulsing with dark light, ready to respond. And then, nothing moved. Not a shot fired. No sound. No light. Only the vast stillness of two ancient forces meeting at last. In that silence, Arya and the sleeper spoke, not with words, but with memory, sharing visions of what each had seen, what each had lost, and what each wanted. The sleeper offered an end to pain, a quiet galaxy with no war, no need, no fear, because there would be no life left to feel anything. Arya offered resistance, not for the sake of survival, but because life, even with fear, was worth the chaos. The battle was not seen, only felt. A ripple through stars, a tremor through space, and then, one by one, council worlds began to see their skies clear, their systems stabilize, their records return. The black sphere did not shatter. It folded in on itself, vanishing without sound, and in its place only the stars remained. The Titan returned to Earth, slowly dimming, its energy spent. Arya stepped out of the mind of a god, tired but standing, and Polaris whispered softly, "The choice has been made, and you chose us." Peace did not come at once, but the galaxy began to heal, and on Earth, beneath the lunar citadel, the Titan chamber remained open, not as a weapon, but as a reminder that even in the darkest silence a voice can rise, a voice like thunder, a voice like Earth,